My son-in-law told me the vacation I paid for was couples only, so I stayed home. Then he posted photos online with his entire family there smiling from the villa I'd booked. He thought he got away with it, but he never expected my response. A formal, itemized invoice delivered by courier to his office. Before we dive into this intense story, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. We'd also love to know where you're all tuning in from. Let us know in the comments. The silence in my house had become a presence of its own. It had been 5 years since my wife Helen passed away, but on some evenings her absence felt as new and sharp as a shard of glass. I would sit in the armchair she'd chosen, the worn floral fabric a ghost of her touch, and listen to the old house settle around me. It was on one such evening, with the weight of loneliness pressing down, that the idea first sparked. It was a brilliant, shimmering thing in the gray quiet, Tuscany. Helen and I had always dreamed of renting a villa in the Italian countryside. We depictured ourselves on a stone terrace, a bottle of Chianti between us, watching the sun dip below the rolling hills. We'd saved for it, planned for it, but life, as it so often does, had other plans. Now the dream felt like a hollowed-out piece of my past. But what if I could reshape it? What if I could fill that hollow space with a new memory? My daughter Emily was my whole world now. She had her mother's compassionate eyes and a laugh that could clear the clouds from any sky. Seeing her happy was the sole purpose of my days. Her husband, Greg, was a newer addition. They'd been married for 3 years, and while Emily was clearly smitten, I was still taking his measure. He was ambitious, polished, and worked at a high-flying marketing firm where image was everything. He was a man who knew how to say all the right things, but his smiles never quite seemed to reach his eyes. I pushed my reservations aside. This trip wouldn't be for him, it would be for Emily. It would be for me to feel a flicker of that old family warmth I so desperately missed. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over Emily's name. My heart beat a little faster with a feeling I hadn't felt in years, genuine excitement. I imagined Emily's face when I told her. I pictured the three of us walking through ancient Florentine streets, sharing gelato, making a memory that could stand against the encroaching silence. I dialed her number, the cheerful ringing filling the room. When she answered, her bright, familiar voice was a balm. "Hi, Dad, everything okay?" "Everything's wonderful, sweetheart," I said, a real smile spreading across my face. "I have an idea, a big one. How do you and Greg feel about Italy?" I explained the whole plan, a 2-week stay in a magnificent Tuscan villa I'd found online, complete with a private pool and a view that looked like a Renaissance painting. I told her I wanted to take care of everything, all expenses paid. It was not a gift, I explained, but an investment in our family. For a moment there was stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then Emily erupted in a cascade of joyous disbelief. "Dad, are you serious? A villa in Tuscany? That's unbelievable," she exclaimed. "Greg is going to flip. Let me talk to him. I'll call you right back. Oh, Dad, thank you." She hung up and I leaned back in my chair, the silence in the house no longer feeling lonely but peaceful. It was filled with the promise of laughter, of shared meals, of the Tuscan sun on my face. I had done the right thing. I was pulling my small family closer, weaving a new thread into the tapestry that Helen and I had started. I closed my eyes and allowed myself a moment of pure, unadulterated hope. For the first time in a long time, the future felt bright. The call back from Emily didn't come that night, or the next morning. It was late the following afternoon when my phone finally buzzed with her name. My hopeful mood had begun to curdle into a low-grade anxiety. I'd imagined her calling back within the hour, bubbling with plans and excitement. The delay felt unnatural. "Hi, honey," I answered, trying to keep my tone light. "I was starting to think you'd run off to Italy without me." Her laugh was strained. "Hi, Dad, sorry, things have been crazy at work. Listen, I talked to Greg." I sat up straighter, my senses on high alert. The tone of her voice was all wrong. It was hesitant, laced with an apology before she'd even said anything. "And?" I prompted gently. "He's so excited. We both are. It's the most generous thing anyone has ever done, Dad, really," she began, the words rushing out a little too quickly. "It's just there's a small issue with the place you picked out." My heart sank. An issue? It looked perfect. 5 stars, all the reviews were glowing. "No, it is perfect, it's incredible. It's just that, well, Greg did some digging on the resort's website, and the specific package for that villa, it's a couples-only retreat package. It's designed for honeymoons and romantic getaways. They're very strict about it." I frowned, the logic not quite tracking. "Couples only? That seems odd for a 3-bedroom villa. I can just book it as the primary guest. It shouldn't matter who stays with me." "I know, it's weird," she said, her voice dropping to an almost whisper. "Greg said it's one of those new-age wellness resorts that focuses on partner-centric experiences. He even called their booking agent to confirm. They said the booking had to be for couples only. He feels terrible about it, Dad. He spent all last night trying to find a way around it. The disappointment that washed over me was as cold and sharp as a winter tide. It wasn't just about the trip, it was the sting of exclusion, the familiar feeling of being the odd one out, the third wheel, the lonely widower. I felt my throat tighten. Oh, I said, the single word feeling heavy as lead. I see. We could find another place, she offered quickly, a different villa that doesn't have such a stupid rule. But the spell was broken. The shimmering, perfect idea had been tarnished. I didn't want to be the reason they had to settle for a lesser vacation. I wanted them to have the best. Forcing a magnanimous tone, I sighed. No, sweetheart, you and Greg should go. Think of it as a second honeymoon, my treat. You both work so hard, you deserve it. Dad, no, we can't, she protested, though her protest felt weak, as if she were reading from a script. I insist, I said firmly. My happiness comes from seeing you happy. I've already booked the flights and the villa under my name, but I can call and transfer the reservation to you. I'll have to cancel my own flight, of course. There will probably be a cancellation fee, but don't you worry about that for a second. A wave of guilt radiated through the phone. Dad, I feel awful. Don't be, I said, my voice sounding more convincing than I felt. This is a good thing. Go have the time of your lives. Just promise me you'll send lots of pictures. We ended the call and I sank back into the armchair. The silence rushed back in, colder and more mocking than before. A couples-only package for a family-sized villa, it felt flimsy, it felt wrong. I trusted my daughter, but Greg, his smooth, persuasive voice echoed in my mind. This had his fingerprints all over it. A man who was an expert in marketing and branding would know exactly how to package a lie. I took a deep breath, the pain in my chest a familiar ache of loneliness. I had spent 40 years as a corporate lawyer, navigating contracts full of deliberate omissions and parsing arguments built on half-truths. I knew deception when I saw it. And though I would never let my daughter see my suspicion, a cold thought settled deep within me. He had convinced her this was true, and he had used her love for me to sell the lie. But he had forgotten who I was and, more importantly, who I had been for 40 years. After Helen passed, my life was rebuilt around a single pillar, Emily. I retired from the firm a few years early to make sure I was always available. I became the father who cooked her favorite meals when she was studying for her college finals, the one who helped her move into her first apartment, and the one who walked her down the aisle, my heart a painful mix of pride and loss. Every sacrifice was a joy, every moment spent ensuring her stability and happiness was a tribute to the woman we both missed so dearly. I poured everything I was into being the rock she needed. Then came Greg. I remember the first time Emily brought him home for dinner. He walked in with a bottle of wine that cost more than my monthly grocery bill and a smile that seemed professionally engineered for charm. He was handsome, dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost a small fortune, and he spoke with an easy confidence that filled the room. He complimented my home, my cooking, and most of all, Emily. "You've raised an incredible woman, Ronald," he said, raising his glass in a toast. "Her compassion and intelligence are a true credit to you." On the surface, it was everything a father would want to hear, but as the evening wore on, I noticed little things. His questions always seemed to circle back to my career. "A senior partner at Blackwood & Finch, that's legendary," he'd remarked. "I can't imagine the kind of portfolio you managed." Later, he'd made a joke about my vintage watch, a gift from Helen. "Careful with that, Emily," he'd said with a wink. "That thing could probably pay off our mortgage." Emily had laughed, swatting his arm playfully. I had only smiled politely, but a small, cold knot had formed in my stomach. He wasn't just seeing me, he was assessing me. I was her father, yes, but I was also an asset, a symbol of a certain kind of wealth and stability that he aspired to. Over the next few years, this pattern continued. He was always respectful to my face, but there was an undercurrent of calculation to our interactions. He would casually mention a business idea that needed investors or lament the cost of renovating their kitchen, all while staring at me with an expectant look. I always deflected politely, channeling my financial support through Emily for her birthday or holidays, never directly to him. I had built my fortune by reading people, and my instincts told me that Greg saw my generosity not as love for my daughter, but as a well that he could draw from. The couple's only excuse for the Tuscany trip was the most audacious example of his maneuvering yet. It was so perfectly tailored to prey on my deepest insecurity, my status as a widower. It was a gentle, almost kind way of pushing me out of the picture while simultaneously taking what I offered. He had weaponized my love for Emily, using her as the gentle voice to deliver the blow. He knew I would never argue with her, that I would always retreat to protect her from any conflict. It was a masterful, manipulative move. As I made the calls to the airline and the travel agency, the financial cost was the least of my concerns. The non-refundable fee for my flight was substantial, and the booking agency for the villa charged a penalty for changing the lead guest's name, but I paid it all without a second thought. The real cost was the fresh crack it put in my heart. It was the confirmation of a suspicion I had tried for years to ignore. My son-in-law did not respect me. He did not see me as family. He saw me as a bank account with a friendly face, and he had just orchestrated a transaction that neatly cut out the inconvenient human element. Me. A few days later, a glossy travel packet arrived, addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Greg Thompson. Emily called to thank me, her voice still laced with that same forced cheerfulness. "The itinerary looks incredible, Dad. We promised to take a picture for you at the Uffizi Gallery." "You do that, sweetheart," I said, my voice even. "Have the time of your lives." As they left for their trip, I settled back into the silence of my home, but something had shifted inside me. The soft melancholy had been replaced by something harder and colder. It was the familiar, dispassionate focus of my old profession. I had been presented with a case, a breach of trust so flagrant it demanded a response. Greg thought he had won. He thought the old man had been placated, sent off to his quiet corner with a pat on the head. He was sunning himself in Tuscany on my dime, believing his cleverness had paid off. But the final arguments had not yet been made. For 2 weeks I heard very little. A few text messages from Emily with pictures of pasta and ancient architecture. "Thinking of you, Dad, wish you were here," one read, accompanied by a photo of her and Greg smiling forcedly into the camera. I replied with simple, encouraging words, playing the part of the benevolent father perfectly. I did not need to investigate Greg in the traditional sense. I didn't need a private detective to uncover his secrets. I knew what his greatest weakness was, his ego. And I knew that eventually his ego would lead him to expose himself. All I had to do was wait. The moment came on a Tuesday evening. I was sitting in my study, scrolling through the news on my tablet when a notification popped up. "Greg Thompson has added 47 photos to a new album, Tuscany Family Trip 2024. My breath caught family trip. I tapped on the notification and my screen filled with a grid of bright, sun-drenched images. The first photo was a group shot. There on the beautiful stone terrace of the villa I had chosen stood Emily and Greg, and standing with them, beaming from ear to ear, were Greg's parents. In another photo, his younger sister was laughing as she cannonballed into the pool. I scrolled slowly, methodically through every single picture. There they were, the whole Thompson clan, raising glasses of wine at the dinner table. There they were, posing together in front of the Florence Cathedral. There was Greg with his arm around his father, the two of them looking like lords of the manor. It was not a couples-only retreat. It was a full-blown vacation for his family, funded entirely by me. The betrayal was so brazen, so absolute, it was almost stunning in its audacity. He hadn't just lied to exclude me, he had lied to replace me with his own family. The pain I felt was sharp, but it was quickly overshadowed by a glacial calm. The hurt receded and the lawyer took over. This was no longer a personal slight. This was fraud. I looked at the photo of them all toasting at the dinner table. Greg had made his post public, a broadcast to the world of the wonderful, lavish life he was leading. He wanted everyone to see, he wanted the credit. And I was going to make sure he got it. My fingers moved with a new sense of purpose. I navigated to my online banking portal and began to download the statements. The flight charges for Emily and Greg, my own non-refundable flight cancellation fee, the wire transfer to the Italian villa rental agency, the prepaid wine tasting tour I'd booked as a surprise. Every line item a testament to my generosity, every penny a piece of his deceit. I saved everything to a secure folder on my computer, my mind working with the cold precision that had once been my trademark in the courtroom. I wasn't just collecting receipts, I was building a case. The evidence was irrefutable. The motive was clear. All that remained was to deliver the verdict. I swiveled in my chair and opened my email. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I composed a message to Maria, my former legal assistant who now worked as a freelance paralegal. We had kept in touch, and she still handled personal matters for me from time to time. Subject: client reimbursement request. Dear Maria, I trust you are well. I require your assistance with a small financial matter. I have attached a series of receipts and bank statements pertaining to a trip I recently financed for a third party under the assumption it was a gift. New information has come to light that has redefined the nature of this transaction. Please compile these expenses into a formal, itemized invoice. List each charge clearly. Add a 10% administrative and processing fee. The invoice should be made payable to Ronald Gable. Payment terms are to be payable in full within 30 days. The invoice is to be delivered to a Mr. Greg Thompson. Please find his office address below. I require it to be delivered by a professional bonded courier service. Request signature on delivery. Thank you for your prompt attention to this matter. Best. Ronald. I attached the meticulously organized files and hit send. A profound sense of release washed over me. I was no longer the passive victim of his scheme. I was now the architect of its consequences. I had moved from the emotional space of a hurt father to the professional space of a lawyer seeking restitution. The game had changed, and Greg had no idea he was even playing. My first move was subtle, a quiet ripple in the digital pond Greg had so proudly filled. I went back to his social media page, to the album of his smiling, triumphant family. I scrolled to the main group photo on the villa's terrace. Then with a steady hand, I clicked the like button. And in the comment section, where his friends and colleagues were posting messages of envy and praise, I added my own. Looks amazing, so glad you're all having fun. It was benign, it was supportive. To any outside observer, it was the comment of a kind father-in-law happy to see his family enjoying themselves. But I knew that to Greg, and especially to Emily, it would land with the force of a well-aimed stone. It was a signal, I know. Less than an hour later, my phone rang. It was Emily. Dad, her voice was thin, anxious. I saw your comment, thank you. Of course, sweetheart, I replied, my tone perfectly even. It looks like a wonderful trip. I didn't realize Greg's whole family was able to make it. That must have been a lovely surprise. I delivered the line without a hint of accusation, letting the words hang in the air between us. There was a long pause on her end, thick with unspoken words. I could picture her perfectly, pacing, chewing on her lip, desperately trying to formulate a response that wasn't an outright lie. Oh yeah, she finally stammered. It was a last-minute thing. His parents were already in Europe for their anniversary, and his sister was studying in Spain, so it just sort of happened. Greg thought it would be a nice surprise for them. It just sort of happened, the classic refuge of someone who can't defend their actions. The flimsiness of the excuse was almost insulting. My meticulously planned and paid-for trip with bookings made months in advance had not just happened to coincide with his entire family's European travel schedule. It was a lie, and a poorly constructed one at that, but I didn't challenge it, not yet. How lovely, I said calmly. Spontaneity is the spice of life. You all look very happy. Helen would have loved to see you all together like that. That was the twist of the knife. Mentioning her mother, invoking the purity of the family ideal that he had so callously corrupted. The silence on the other end of the line was my answer. I heard a shaky breath. Yeah, she whispered. Dad, I should go. We're about to head out to dinner. Of course, enjoy yourselves, I said. Talk to you when you get back. I hung up the phone, my heart aching for my daughter. She was trapped, caught in the web of her husband's making. Her weak defense of him told me everything I needed to know. She was complicit, yes, but she was drowning in guilt. The first crack in their united front had appeared. My simple comment had transformed their luxurious vacation into an uncomfortable performance. Every smile for a photo, every shared laugh over dinner would now be tinged with the knowledge that I was watching, and that I knew they had deceived me. This was not a confrontation in the traditional sense, with shouting and accusations. I had learned long ago that the most effective confrontations are the ones that happen quietly. They are the ones that force the other party to sit with the truth of their own actions. Greg and Emily were now sitting in the five-star prison of their lie, and the bill for their stay was already on its way. 2 days later, an email from Maria landed in my inbox. Attached was a PDF of the finalized invoice. It was a beautiful document in a cold, corporate way. The letterhead was simple and professional. Each charge was listed with a date and a description. Round-trip airfare E. Thompson, round-trip airfare G. Thompson, non-refundable cancellation fee R. Gable, villa rental deposit, final villa payment, prepaid winery tour package. At the bottom, the 10% administrative fee was added, and below that in bold was the grand total. It was a formidable number. Below the total was the line, payment due in 30 days to avoid interest accrual. Maria had done her job perfectly. It was no longer a collection of receipts, it was a formal demand for payment. It was business. I replied with a single word, proceed. While I waited, Emily's attempts to smooth things over grew more frequent. She sent more photos, this time with captions aimed directly at me. We found a little shop that sells lemon soap just like the kind you and Mom used to love, followed by a picture of a lemon. This view made me think of you, followed by a picture of a sunset. Each message was a small, desperate plea for forgiveness, an attempt to digitally include me in the trip I had been deliberately excluded from. It was a sad, transparent effort, and it only hardened my resolve. She wasn't sorry for the lie, she was sorry she got caught. Greg's influence was still too strong. He had likely coached her, telling her to placate the old man to keep him happy so the money would continue to flow in the future. They still didn't understand the fundamental shift that had occurred. They thought this was an emotional slight that could be smoothed over with kind words. They hadn't realized that I had already moved on to legal remedy. The day they were due to fly home, I got a final confirmation email from the courier service. Package delivered and signed for by G. Thompson at 11:42 a.m. I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. The trap had been sprung. The real proof, the final piece of the case, was not some hidden document. It was the invoice itself, now sitting on Greg's desk in his glass-walled office. It was a tangible representation of his deceit. It transformed his triumphant family vacation into a massive, looming debt. It stripped away the veneer of the successful, generous family man he projected and exposed the grifting, disrespectful user underneath. I knew there would be no more weak excuses, no more placating texts. The next communication would be one of pure, unfiltered fury. The carefully constructed world Greg had built for himself, where he could enjoy a lifestyle funded by others without consequence, was about to come crashing down, and I would not be there to break his fall. I would simply be the signatory at the bottom of the bill, waiting to be paid. The stakes had been escalated from a family tiff to a financial ultimatum, and it was a battle he was completely unprepared to fight. I didn't have to wait long. The call came that evening just as I was sitting down to a quiet dinner. The caller ID flashed Greg Thompson. I let it ring 3 times before answering, taking a slow, deliberate sip of water. I wanted him to know he was not my priority. "Hello, Greg," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "Ronald," he sputtered, his voice a choked combination of rage and panic. "What is this? What on earth is the meaning of this invoice?" I could hear the frantic energy crackling through the phone. I pictured him in his office, the sleek modern space now feeling like a cage. His colleagues had surely seen the uniformed courier deliver the formal document. They had surely seen the look on his face as he read it. His carefully curated image as a smooth, successful partner was now tainted by this bizarre and humiliating public delivery. "I believe the document is self-explanatory," I replied coolly. "It's an itemized list of expenses for a trip to Tuscany. I financed the trip under one set of assumptions, and upon discovering those assumptions were false, I have submitted a request for reimbursement." "Reimbursement? It was a gift. You said it was a gift," he yelled. "A gift to my daughter and son-in-law for a couples-only retreat, yes," I clarified, my tone unwavering. "A gift has certain implicit conditions, the most fundamental of which is that it is received in good faith. What you orchestrated was not done in good faith. You misrepresented the nature of the trip to exclude me and include your own family. That is not a gift, that is misappropriation. Legally, it's a textbook case of fraudulent misrepresentation." There was a stunned silence on his end. He had expected an emotional argument, a shouting match between a father-in-law and a son-in-law. He was prepared for family drama. He was utterly unprepared for a legal deposition. You can't be serious," he stammered, his anger deflating into disbelief. "You're going to charge me for my own sister's flight." "I am not," I corrected him patiently. "I am charging you for your sister's flight, which you presumably invited her on. All expenses were routed through my accounts. The final bill is your responsibility. You were the host of the Thompson family vacation, after all. I saw the pictures, it looked lovely." The mention of the photos, the source of his pride now turned into the primary evidence against him, sent a fresh jolt of fury through him. "This is insane, this is petty, I'm not paying this." "That is certainly your choice," I said, taking a bite of my salmon. "However, as the invoice states, payment is due in 30 days. After that, I will begin charging interest. If payment is not received in 60 days, I will have no choice but to file a claim in small claims court. It's a very straightforward case. The paper trail is impeccable. Frankly, the public nature of a court filing would be far more embarrassing for a man in your position than simply settling the debt quietly. But again, the choice is yours." I heard a sharp intake of breath. He knew I was right. The last thing a partner at a marketing firm needed was a public lawsuit filed by his father-in-law for tricking him into paying for a vacation. The humiliation would be catastrophic. "You wouldn't," he whispered, all the fight gone from his voice. "Do not mistake my love for my daughter for weakness, Greg," I said, my voice dropping, losing its legal chill and gaining a personal coldness. You lied to me, you disrespected me. You disrespected the memory of my wife by corrupting an idea that was precious to me. You did all of this for a few free plane tickets and a week of bragging rights. So yes, I would. I let that hang in the air for a moment before delivering the final blow. You have 30 days. I suggest you speak to your bank. I hung up the phone before he could reply. The climax was not his yelling or my threats. It was the profound, suffocating silence that followed, where he was left alone with the consequences of his actions, stripped bare of his charm and his lies, with nothing but a very large bill and a career to protect. The second call, the one I had been both dreading and expecting, came an hour later. It was Emily. Her voice was barely a whisper, broken by quiet sobs. "Dad, Greg just came home. He told me what you did." I set my fork down and gave her my full attention. "He told you that I sent him a bill for the trip he lied about?" I asked gently, but without apology. "He said you're threatening to sue him," she cried. "How could you do that to us, to your family?" The old Ronald, the one from a few weeks ago, would have crumbled. He would have apologized, rescinded the invoice, and done anything to soothe his daughter's pain. But that Ronald was gone. "Emily," I said, my voice firm but full of a sorrow she couldn't possibly understand. "Let me be very clear. You and I are family. Your husband's actions proved that he does not consider me to be part of his. He lied to my face, used you to do it, and stole a memory from me. He didn't just want a free vacation, he wanted to erase me from the picture. Do you have any idea how that feels?" She was quiet, her sobs subsiding into hiccuping breaths. "I offered you a gift of love and connection, a way for us to feel like a family again after losing your mother," I continued, the words coming from a place of deep, raw honesty. "And your husband twisted it into an opportunity to freeload with his parents and sister. He posted it online for the world to see as if it were his grand achievement. The disrespect is staggering, Emily. And the fact that you went along with it, that is what hurts the most." "I didn't know what to do," she whispered. "He convinced me it was the only way, that you wouldn't mind." "He convinced you because you allowed yourself to be convinced," I said softly. "And I am not angry with you, sweetheart. I am just deeply, deeply disappointed. My love for you is unconditional, but my respect and my bank account are not. Your husband needs to learn that actions have consequences." That was the turning point for her. The quiet finality in my voice, the absence of rage, the simple presentation of the facts. It was the truth, unvarnished and undeniable. She finally saw past Greg's nerrat. I've of the crazy, vindictive father-in-law, and understood the profound wound I had suffered. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she finally cried, and this time the sorrow felt real, untainted by excuses. "You're right, I'm so sorry." We talked for a long time that night. I did not demand she leave him or choose a side. I simply told her that for our relationship to heal, she needed to understand the gravity of what had been done. In the end, Greg paid the bill. I learned from Emily that he had to take out a personal loan to cover the full amount, a fact that his pride could barely withstand. Their marriage was deeply fractured. The incident had exposed the core of his character, and it was something Emily could no longer ignore. Their future was uncertain, but that was their path to walk. A few weeks later, Emily came to my house alone. She brought a small lemon tree in a terracotta pot. "To plant in the garden," she said, her eyes meeting mine, "for you and Mom." We spent the afternoon in the yard, digging in the soil, not speaking much. But as we packed the earth around the roots of the little tree, I felt a seed of hope being planted in my own heart. The trust between us was broken, but it was not shattered beyond repair. It would take time, patience, and effort to rebuild, but for the first time in a long time, I felt we were finally on the same side. The silence in my house felt a little less heavy that evening. It was still there, but it was now punctuated by the promise of forgiveness, and the quiet, unshakable knowledge that I had stood up for myself, for Helen's memory, and for the simple, profound price of respect.